Hello, everyone. Welcome. For some of you, welcome back. We are thrilled to have you all with us today for another interactive discussion with our featured guests, Forrester Principal Analyst David Mooter and Capgemini's own VP and Global Offer Leader for Business APIs and Applications Integration, Rahul Murudkar. Last year, David and Rahul explored how APIs and integration are powering the modern enterprise, from enabling real-time data flows to unlocking better customer experiences and innovation. Importantly, in that conversation, we began to look at how AI is in a growing role in that landscape, how it was already helping automate, optimize, and even sometimes rethink how integration gets done. Today, we're going to build on that conversation's foundation, digging deeper into enterprise readiness for Agentic AI as a fundamentally new operating model and what it takes to move from those experimental pilots to real production, where integration and APIs become the control points for how Agentic AI operates at scale. So without further ado, I'm happy to hand it over to you, Rahul.
Thanks, Jesse, and a warm welcome, David. Thank you for joining us today. Let me start with the first question around the market context. As the enterprises are ready for their agentic AI journey as well, are they truly ready? Are we getting ourselves ahead of this curve?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag. So you're reminding me of a survey we did actually recently. I don't have the exact data, but I can give you the directional angle of the survey. We had a maturity model in there asking on, I think, about 7 areas to assess readiness. And we saw pretty strongly that some organizations were hitting all of the areas that they're very, very prepared, and some were very unprepared. So that shows a mixed bag. And what was interesting about that is those that were in the more high maturity ones were focusing on integration as the main focus area to be ready over the next 12 months, while those that were in the, let's say, the unready maturity were focused primarily on model capabilities. And I think that indicates that readiness is very much about integration, that moving beyond just models, focusing on integration. Now, where are organizations? Yeah, some may be ready, but how far along are they? Generally not very far along. So if I were to give you the sort of the state of or the trends of my conversations, let's just pick on MCP as a proxy for agentic readiness. MCP conversations in 2025, for most of the year, my clients were just asking, like, what is this thing? How should I think about it? That changed pretty strongly in the fourth quarter, especially middle of the fourth quarter. A very strong shift towards, we want to make MCP real. We want to make this something that's ready for production. And that trend has continued through 2026. So I think that what that shows from what I see in my clients, what I hear from others, is that most organizations are very much in the experimentation, the POC phase, and they're trying to transition into production. But again, integration maturity, also governance, operating model, I think these will be the main constraints around that. And governance is on people's minds, which is great, that it's on their mind early rather than late. But those are the things that we need to focus on to be ready.
And how do we characterize this enterprise today with respect to agentic AI, David, when you look at that?
Again, the adoption, very experimental, limited production adoptions. The ones I see that are live are tend to be more internally facing, where it's safer. Definitely, financial services is both excited but hesitant for obvious reasons with regulatory constraints. I think it's more of a challenge there. So like any software, it's going to go through phases. So yeah, current state is, like I said, early stage. Organizations that are maybe a little bit further ahead of others are thinking a lot about governance, which is great, because when I think about the progression of APIs over the years, a lot of organizations did not think about governance for API programs when APIs were like the hot new thing. They didn't think about it until after they had a governance problem. But I have seen, and maybe it's because of those pain points, we've learned those lessons. I have seen that early stage AI programs, agentic AI programs, are very focused on governance, including on integration, and MCP raises a lot of governance questions as well. So, so governance again would be the main area. Observability, which you could argue is part of governance, is another area that organizations are trying to get their arms around. One area I have not really seen, though, that I think is going to be an issue as adoption grows is lifecycle management. I have not, particularly, again, I'll point to MCP. I think about MCP servers. If I introduce, let's say, a new tool, that's arguably a breaking change. If I change the behavior of a tool, that is arguably a breaking change. How do I version that? Like I version REST APIs. Everyone I ask that question to, how are you thinking about this? The answer is, oops, I wasn't, but I really should be thinking about that. So, so that's kind of my take on the current state of agentic AI. Maybe a question for you, Rahul, is what do you see as preventing organizations from, I've talked a lot about being these early stage POC type projects. What do you see as preventing them from moving that into production?
I think that's a great question, and I think you touched upon a lot in that in your previous responses as well. We see a lot of organizations still stuck with the piloting or the POC at this point of time, and the barrier isn't the AI itself. If you see, it's everything around it as well. POCs succeed in isolation very much, but because they have been deliberately kept away from the hard realities of enterprises like security, compliances, cost management as well, if you see. And when they move to the production, this becomes non-negotiable. And that's where many of these initiatives actually are, not able to scale to the production grade from the POC. Now, the second part to that is the integration as well. Okay, you again had touched upon that a lot of organizations that we are being speaking to don't have the integration platform, ready to scale for agentic AI. They have been, they have the platforms which were built or modernized over the last decade or so, but they are being designed for predictability, transactional workflows. And when we talk about this autonomous decision making in real time, you require a different architecture, and we'll talk about that as well. But that becomes the key bottleneck. And then you rightly touched upon the governance as well. Sometimes this governance is too light, where then you have the risk of lack of trust as well. And sometimes the governance laid down by some organizations can be a bit rigid as well. So it actually then pulls down the innovation to a large extent as well. So it's about the gap is not about the AI tool, but around how the overall foundation has to be laid down is very critical. Without this modern scalable foundation that connects systems data, allows you to actually have a much more real-time decision making as well. Organizations cannot scale to the agentic AI at an enterprise grade as such. And that is what is actually holding them back from going from POC to a more production grade ecosystem for the agentic ecosystem. That's what my take is there, based on my experience with the clients as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That makes a lot of sense with me. I think what you're touching on there is maybe we should talk about like what defines an integration foundation that's ready for AI, right? Like it seems like you would agree that you need that solid foundation, right? So, my thoughts on that. Well, it's kind of what is old is new again. We need high quality discoverable APIs with clear versioning. So, for example, if you have an API that's poorly designed, that's not well documented in the old days, if I wanted to consume your API, I could just walk over to your desk and have a conversation. And maybe you could sit by my desk and help me debug it. AI agents can't do that. So good design, good documentation of your APIs is like, you just must have it, full stop. It is non-optional for AI agents to work. Event-driven architecture for real-time signals to agents so they can respond in real time, not after like yesterday's batch cycle or even a 20-minute ago batch cycle. Also real-time event-driven architecture for pushing real-time context into memory or sources of knowledge so that when agents are acting, they're acting on the latest state of the enterprise. Observability is key. And of course, integration plays a big part of that with API gateways, putting gateways in front of your LLMs, MCP servers, between the MCP server and the tools. If the tool is implemented by iPaaS, you've got observability in that as well. And then tying all that together to see how agents are behaving. Strong security identity, of course, is a big deal. Cost visibility, which again goes back to integration through gateways to see not just what tokens are being consumed, but what is this API costing me? So an example I saw at a conference recently, it was a telco that they were like some kind of 911 emergency responder service. They use a Google Maps API to do geolocation. And they had an AI agent for something. I didn't really get the details, but whatever this agent was doing called this Google Map API, which was monetized.
Correct. And
it got in a loop where it just kept calling this API, and they got some, I think it was like tens of thousands of dollars bill in 4 hours.
Correct.
So we're seeing that kind of visibility. And you reminded me of another thing that's, I think, important, which, again, not necessarily new, but AI agents make it more urgent. You talked about legacy systems, old architectures, like it may be an old ERP that's not for the modern world. That's a common one I see out there. Those have trouble keeping up with real-time load with modern apps in general, and AI agents have much more unpredictable spikiness to them. And so middleware integration can also be used to help insulate those creaky old back-end systems, doing things like change data capture to copy data from a batch system into some real-time data warehouse, not maybe data warehouse be the wrong word, some kind of real-time data store, maybe a vector store in the case of an AI agent. So middleware has always been a way of helping insulate modern apps from those old back-end systems, and applies even more with AI agents.
Correct. Absolutely agree on that. And when we talk about the integration foundation as well from our side as well, when we actually go and speak to our clients as well, many times it's all about having a much more disciplined, governance, reusable integration ecosystem actually that can not only scale for today's requirement, but also for the futuristic high frequency intelligent consumption that is going to happen as well, as you rightly called out as well about the Google thing as well, that you need to have those sort of the backbone to drive this for the future. You talked about governance, which is absolutely right. I've seen many times that the organizations talk about governance, have that on their document, but the execution is lagging at the moment. So that is where we need to be making sure that this is rightly enforced. Security, as what you called it, cost management now coming into mix as well with the AI story as well. Very, very important over here that we have to drive as well. The other thing which I also wanted to call out was the operating model as well, David, that you can't treat APIs and integration as a technical asset. They are to be treated like a product. You have to have the right ownership around those. We're talking about APIs, now we're talking about MCP in the coming days and months as well. So they have to have the right ownership. And what you called out earlier as well, the proper lifecycle management, versioning, it has to be there as well. Because if that goes out of control, you may have a serious consequences of how this whole integration foundation can go for a complete chaos as well. And then what we also have been very much mindful about is making sure that the frameworks and the patterns are rightly incorporated as well. Whether we're talking about the real-time signaling that you just touched upon, David, in the event-driven mechanism as well, that pattern has to be there. How do you make sure that you have the right mechanism of how your underlying capabilities are being managed, like observability and error management in this whole new world of agentic era as well, is very essential going forward as well. And that's something that is a key element of this foundation as well. So when you take it back into the agentic AI perspective as well, David, the same thing applies over here. My point is governance, making sure that you have the right operating model that we spoke about, having the frameworks and the patterns and the standards being laid down as well. So very important that as you scale further as well, this becomes very important. So it's not about just adding tools over here, but it's also making sure that you put the right structure, you put the right discipline as well, and the operating model in place to make it work much more in a much more standardized and consistent way as well. Yeah. So let me touch upon the other topic that you just you spoke about earlier as well, is about MCP. Where does MCP in today's world add value, and how does the organization leadership should approach this particular topic, David?
Yeah, MCP obviously has a lot of momentum. I was honestly skeptical of it when it first came out due to some of the gaps in the specification, but the momentum behind it by vendors has been enormous. The people behind the spec have done a great job at addressing some of the gaps. I think it still has some more to go, but it's in significantly better shape now than it was a year ago. But that said, like any new tool, you have to use it the right way in the right use cases. So what won't work is taking all your existing APIs and just tossing them into an MCP server. You need MCP tools that have agents in mind. And so let me give an example. If you give agents a lot of low-level system application APIs that don't really reflect a business task or a business capability, and then the agent has to figure out how to assemble them to do a business task, you're increasing your cost because it's going to be more tokens, more tools to work with, and you're going to decrease quality because agents are going to not always figure out how to do them correctly. So if there's a particular task, like this task should just always be done this way, then orchestrate those. Use something like iPaaS to orchestrate those APIs in that task, and then make that task the MCP tool. Ironically, AI works better, agentic AI works better when you have more deterministic things you're giving it. And only make it decisions where it really absolutely must make a decision. If it doesn't have to make a decision, try to make that deterministic, decrease costs, increase quality. I already touched on lifecycle management observability. By having a gateway, I think is very key for those. And then you touched on product ownership. That I think is also key, because when we talk about an MCP tool, it should be handled like a product that fulfills, like I said, a business capability or business task. It's not a technical low-level thing. Another challenge with MCP that's been getting a lot of buzz is the context window bloat. It loads all tools into the context window, all information about them. I think that will be addressed. I think in a future revision, we'll see progressive disclosure. But you can address some of that now, again, by a few ways. One is what I just said, is have the right coarse granularity for your MCP tools. Also, if you have a gateway in front of the MCP server, you can have policies. So maybe this agent needs to see all 5 MCP tools. This other agent only needs to see 3. So don't let it see the other 2 it doesn't need access to. That reduces context. Same thing with output fields. If there's certain outputs it doesn't need, you can mask those. Another one is agent skills as well. Agent skills it used to be called Claude skills. Was open sourced by Anthropic. And that is a way of doing, it has progressive disclosure. It only loads like a header of information to help direct the agent of what to focus on. And then when the agent says, I want to focus on here, it loads the full context of that thing. And agent skills are a good way of telling agents how to get things done, and let it use that to determine when it needs to go towards an MCP tool or not. So if it doesn't, if it guides it away from the MCP, then it's not loading those things into the context window for use cases where it doesn't need it.
Okay.
So yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
And you touched upon the AI gateway as well when you were mentioning the MCP as well. Do you want to really explain, what problems that AI gateway actually would solve with in this whole ecosystem, and how it should be introduced as well in the integration?
Yeah. So AI gateway, just to set a little bit of context. When I first heard the term, to be honest, I was kind of rolling my eyes at it. And the reason why is I cover API management. So the first ones I saw were API management vendors that had a traditional API gateway and added features for AI in it. And I'm like, well, if you have SOAP policies, you don't call it a SOAP gateway. Why do we call it an AI gateway? But to be fair, we have seen some other gateways, some startup ones that are strictly just for AI. And we've seen some API management vendors have, even if they have one gateway runtime, they're starting to package things so that if all you need are the AI functions, you don't need the rest, you don't need the SOAP, you can just buy that AI function. So it is kind of emerging as its own thing. But AI gateways, basically it's like REST API gateways, but for AI-related protocols, typically MCP and LLMs. Traditional REST gateways, of course, are meant for REST. They're not for token economics. They are not for model routing. So some things for managing costs that can be very valuable are semantic caching. So you cache based on the semantic meaning of the payload rather than a string literal match. You can see the obvious reason why that would apply to AI LLMs, but not to, say, a REST API. Also, maybe throttling based on tokens or just logging tokens, so you can see what clients are burning what. Also, for, like I said, for MCP, for having visibility into your MCP tools, who's using what, tracing them. And model routing is also another valuable one. Excuse me. So if you have multiple models, you could do a round robin to try to test which one's getting better outputs. I've also seen some interesting policies on taking a prompt and trying to reduce the cost of that prompt, like find tokens in the prompt that can be removed without changing the meaning of the prompt. And so you send the same meaning to the LLM, but with fewer tokens for it to consume to reduce your costs. That's another interesting policy I've seen out there.
Yeah, and a lot of times, David, I see a lot of folks using API gateway and AI gateway interchangeably as well, many times as well. Yeah. Any thoughts on that you would like to?
Oh, yeah. They don't replace each other. Like I said, some of the vendors, the API gateway is the AI gateway. Right. They just added AI policies to them. And some vendors are separate runtimes. We've seen the same thing like with events. It's also emerging. We've seen some vendors that have a gateway for your message broker, like a Kafka broker or a Solace broker. And those may be separate runtimes. It's just, I kind of like the separate runtime in a sense, because if my gateway is loading, let's say a traditional API gateway, if it's loading resources for SOAP and I'm not using SOAP, I'm just using REST, it's great I have that functionality, but why do I want that in memory consuming resources if I'm not using that feature? And the features of LLMs and MCP are different enough, and eventually A to A, we haven't talked about that. It's not really on people's radar yet, but it will be. It's just different enough that I kind of like them being separate runtimes just for less resource consumption of how they specialize. But they work together, and they can come from the same vendor or from different vendors.
100% agree on that they should be kept as separate runtime as well. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, I've got a question for you. So we've been touching a bit, talking about more early stage. Like I said, organizations are at these early stage POCs, but some are not. Some are really gone all on agents. They may have hundreds and hundreds of agents out there. I've talked to one or two people with that. It's rare, but they're out there. And I know you have as well. So how do you see enterprises governing hundreds of agents safely, so those who are early stage now can make sure they're going in the right direction?
And this is a very important topic, actually, which has been underestimated, this challenge that we're talking about, that you rightly called out as well. You mentioned about some enterprises who have hundreds of agents, and some of them obviously have started with tens of agents at the moment, but comes in next 12 to 18 months, we'll see a lot of enterprises, a lot of organizations actually moving into that space where they will have hundreds of agents working in tandem as well. And that would obviously, it's not about the capability, but it creates a lot of chaos as well. When often, we tend to have just implement a registry and say, let's have some monitoring, and that should work. But these are not sufficient when we talk about this agentic AI ecosystem as well. This is something more than that. This, at its core, has the challenge at the operating model of how we have to address this problem that you really rightly called out. We need to understand that the agents should not be treated just like a software component anymore. They are the decision-making entities now, acting on the behalf of the businesses going forward. Yeah, and governance for this sort of entities has to evolve. So what good looks like at the moment? Number one, as you said, clear ownership, both business and technically as well. Who owns these agents? How they are being owned at the moment? Life cycle management. How do we address them? The onboarding of the agents, all the way from the versioning to its retirement as well. Their visibility, their auditability as well. How do you really address those elements as well? And then, of course, how do you standardize these agents and reuse them across your entire ecosystem as well? And this requires a real shift over here, where we are talking about a new mechanism called control plane or control layer that consistently governs, this whole agentic ecosystem. We are not talking about just the agents or the API, but the entire agentic ecosystem that has to be governed. And this control layer that we are talking about is something that will enforce policy in a consistent manner that we are talking here about. It will provide the visibility end to end for this agentic ecosystem that we're talking about. One agent talking to another agent talking to the calling, making APIs or integration calls as well, the entire all the way to data tools as well, how this is happening. And then it goes all the way to the FinOps element, which has to be baked into that whole control plane as well. That has to be brought in as well. As you called out, you can't be calling APIs or some of this or consuming tokens as well, especially the APIs which are third-party APIs. So how do you address this part when you talk about agents, where we may have a limited control, a semi-autonomous control that we're talking here about? So this control plane is required to ensure that consistency and the governance and the reusability that we are talking about. It's not about just making sure that you build a registry, have the agents over here and their auxiliary, but it's more than that. That how do you embed this whole governance into the fabric of this agentic ecosystem across the enterprise is very essential to ensure that the governance is at the right in the right way and not very limited or very shallow over here when we talk about. So that's very critical over here, David. My experience is.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about the control plane. I actually think API management could become that control plane or a large chunk of it. Maybe there's some parts it couldn't. And I kind of debate if the API management market should be, maybe in a year or two, renamed the API and AI management market. But then that starts to sound like AI. Why everyone's slapping AI on everything, that's getting to be a little bit a cliche. But in this case, I think it may be warranted. But we shall see as the market evolves. Anyway, so yeah, what about event-driven architecture for real-time data? I touched on it earlier, but how are you seeing EDA unlock value for agentic AI?
See, the agentic ecosystem is only effective as it gets the data that we talk about. It strives on that data all across. Without data, the intelligence is no longer existing. We still have organizations. We are working on the batch updates, non-real-time data updates as well. And this is the fundamental gap over here that we see, which will probably be a critical limitation for the agentic AI ecosystem to be brought in as well. Because the agents cannot work on stale data. They have to have a real-time data over here. And this is exactly where the event-driven architecture, or EDA that we call, unlocks that real value. If you see, number one, it is updating the system of records more real time, that allows agents to have the data that it is seeking to operate on. It is also continuously, it has the ability to continuously send the signals, contextual signals, back to agents as well, and make it, let it act on those signals as well, becoming more adaptive, context aware, and take the right decisions going forward as well. So this all, makes the EDA has a very real value across. I think it's one of the foundational element, I would call it, as a part of the agentic integration ecosystem as well. Without EDA, I think it's you just can't have just APIs driving the whole, the agentic integration. You need to have the event-driven architecture mechanism baked into your platforms as well to make it work in a truly agentic, for the truly agentic AI to strive as well, because they need that real-time data. And I'll just give an example, for one of our clients, a CPG client that we have. Now, this client is a huge client as well. And what I found it very interesting is that they did not incorporate EDA for agentic, but the EDA was there at the beginning as well, and how they are leveraging it now as well. So, we're talking about a supply chain management domain as well for the CPG client. Now, they have a mechanism where they have a partner or the B2B partner integration already in place, where any supplier-related issues are also triggered real-time, instantly, on which the applications act as well. Now, what they can extend and what they plan to do is that in the coming months as well, is that the agent can then see the impact of this sort of supply chain issues that are being triggered, see the impact on the inventory, on the customer orders as well, reroute the logistic dynamically as well, and adjust the sourcing and replenishment actually decisions as well, how you want to really take right decisions over here as well. So that that shift from being a reactive operation to get it towards more real-time adaptive operation is what EDA drives value in the whole ecosystem for agentic ecosystem as well. So it's very critical. If you look at the way that the EDA will play a very critical role in the whole foundation going forward. But having said that, what my suggestions to the organization has been that start, if you haven't got EDA in your ecosystem, start introducing the event-driven mechanism or the pattern in a gradual way around key business events, which needs to be triggered at the real time. Layer it alongside the APIs, and the other integration patterns that you have, so that you have the API pattern for your request response as well, but you have the other pattern brought in as well for your asynchronous mechanism as well. And focus first on the high impact decision points that you really want to make sure the EDA really adds value. Once you have got this full construct in place, I think the agentic ecosystem can be embedded into this whole thing, mixed it with, and they can leverage the whole EDA fabric that has been laid down as well. So that probably makes the client much more going forward. So don't jump onto EDA if you don't have it. It is not, but you need to bring it in a very gradual way. That's my point that I would call it out as well. Yeah. And when you talk about this, what's your view, David, on this EDA architecture as well, event-driven architecture as well? How can it actually works to scale for the enterprises?
Yeah, I largely agree with everything you said there. Maybe a couple things to add. I've had some people look at agents and think that they kind of feel like microservice applications. Each agent may be like a microservice. And then, of course, with microservices, we had a lot of asynchronous communication. And a lot of that was for resilience purposes. When you have a microservices architecture with tons and tons of synchronous connections, that's very fragile for for obvious reasons. We don't have to recapitulate. And so asynchronous delivery was the solution to that. And so, yeah, I think for scaling, as we get more agent-to-agent, multi-agent systems, the need for asynchronous communication will actually increase and will become more and more necessary for scaling up. Just an interesting note, the A2A protocol, we haven't talked much about that. It's not something I hear much about, but I do think it will be a hot item maybe end of this year or early next year, as people have gotten their MCP successes behind them. They can then move on to A2A. A2A protocol can be implemented asynchronously. It does not mandate synchronous connections. And I like that, because if you think about multi-agents, agents are slow. And if I have several agents collaborating, like I use, for example, use a research agent with Microsoft Copilot, that thing could take 20 minutes, I don't know, a long time. Do I want a synchronous connection hanging open while all those agents are collaborating? Or do I want to just send a message and then you just send me a message back when you're done? The latter seems a lot more sensible to me. And then I would add to that as well, I go back to what I said earlier about an event gateway. It's not as well known, but there are gateways emerging for message brokers. Imagine this kind of architecture where you have a gateway for your events, that are feeding your agents, either triggering agents or helping with the inter-agent communication, as I described. And you have gateways for the agents talking to the LLMs, to the MCP servers, the MCP calling REST APIs to an API gateway. You can now tie all of that together to get some pretty amazing observability data about how your agents are behaving, not just for operational purposes, but then also to understand how our agents, what are they actually doing in terms of process, and then that can be an input to then trying to find better ways of doing your process. So now we're starting to build a flywheel effect. Maybe we see that agents always call APIs A, B, and C in a row in certain circumstances. Maybe that's a process we just discovered. And we can now make that ABC its own task as just one example. Anyway, yeah, I think that's all my thoughts on EDA. Let's get towards the end here. Throw it back to you, and why don't you share how Capgemini is helping clients adopt agentic integration?
A good question. So let me bring everything back together. So how we are helping our clients across the regions to drive this agentic integration solutions as well. What we are trying to do first thing is that help our client move away from experimentation to really the enterprise scale governed adoption. That is very imperative at the moment to move further down the line as well. And for that, the focus has been on key four areas that we are also driving in parallel with our clients. First thing is readiness, and this goes beyond technology, is your architecture, your integration maturity, your operating model. Is it all ready at the moment? Because without that baseline, you cannot scale agentic AI. It becomes very difficult. So that's number one. So the readiness is very important from that perspective. And many of our folks who are working for our clients are working towards that part with our clients as well. Second, I touched upon that earlier as well, is modernizing your foundation or laying down your foundation for agentic integration. So you may have a foundation which you can extend for your agentic integration, but you need the foundation. And this is very critical because, you need to make sure that as you mentioned, the API-led, event-driven architecture, all these patterns and the frameworks have to work together to support this whole real-time, high-frequency throughput interaction in a very governed way as well. So that is very important that you lay the right foundation over here with those sort of points as well. The next point is then slowly, you need to introduce the likes of MCP. We're not talking about A2A at this point, David, as you called out earlier. Probably we'll see that down the line in Q4, maybe early next year, which gets more maturity as well. But the MCP is something that you need to bring in a very pragmatic manner as well. We help the client to pilot that to deliver the immediate value. And this piloting has to be not just a POC, but it has to be a prototyping that is not a throwaway, but can be extended further down the line as well. So you take the right business cases, use cases, and deliver this pilot. The last, but not an afterthought, is again what we just mentioned earlier as well. We want to enforce the governance and the operating model from day one. That means, the ownership of this APIs, MCP servers, the gateways, whether it's API or AI gateway, lifecycle management of these APIs and the MCP servers as well, policy enforcement, which we're talking about, the security and throughput, throttling and cost management. This all has to be thought through very well and has to be part of your foundation at the very beginning, because if you leave it very end, it is a recipe for disaster. So you need to think about that. So, it's not about just deploying agents and having APIs made available to the agent. That's not going to work beyond a POC from where we started our discussion today. It's about, building the integration foundation, the control layer that supports this agentic system and the operating model that allows them to scale with the consistency and the trust that they are looking for as well. So that is how we actually approaching this particular topic as well with our clients as well as in this area as well. So that's how it is, David. If you ask me how we are taking the clients in this journey together. So, David, your closing remarks for the organizations looking to scale agentic AI from experiment to real impact. What should leaders prioritize right now to get the foundation right?
Yeah, so agentic AI adoption obviously will accelerate. So when I think of agentic AI, I think of three key, at a high level, three things. You've got your processes, data, and your integrations. So you need to understand what processes you need to automate. But in terms of that's probably more of a business leadership thing. On the IT technical side, obviously data and integration would be the two there. Data is important. Data cleanliness, things like knowledge graphs, context graphs are coming up a lot. And I don't want to diminish the value of that, but I tend to focus more on integration because if you have the best knowledge graph in the world, your agent needs to integrate with it somehow, right? And so I think the integration is probably the bigger challenge of those two. I actually have a report recently where I had the line, agentic AI runs on integration, not data lakes. And that raised a few eyebrows, but I stand by that. So yeah, a maturity of integration. And if there's one thing you can do, what I would recommend is you probably have an AI leader somewhere, an AI organization, might be called the Center for Innovation, as they're often called. I'm not a fan of that name, but that's what they're often called. And then you have your enterprise integration team. Have your if those two teams are not aligned, the two leaders of those teams are not aligned, get them aligned. I've seen examples where they're going forward with agentic AI and they realize what an integration problem that they have to make this happen. They should have been talking to the integration team, and so they move the integration leader in the org to be more closely aligned with that AI leader. So that if there's just one thing you do, get that alignment. If you want to go a little bit further in terms of more nuts and bolts, API maturity, best practices around design documentation, treating APIs as products, that would be first and foremost, and getting good API gateway infrastructure in place with an eye towards an AI gateway to help support those AI assets.
David, it's always insightful to speak to you every time I speak to you. I'm done with my questions. Jesse, back to you.
Thanks very much. What an insightful and engaging discussion, guys. Really appreciate it. Based on what I'm seeing in the Q&A, clients are already quite keen to establish a well-governed and observable foundation so they can really successfully adopt agentic integration. So let's get right to it then. Everyone, David and Rahul are going to scan through all of your questions and respond live to as many as we can in the time that we've got left. Any outstanding questions, we'll document and we'll send out written responses to those attendees. So David, Rahul, back to you to work through those audience questions.
All right,
guys, I think maybe first, before we jump deep into questions, there's a good poll that kind of gauges what's resonating with the audience most, and I think is going to lead nicely into some of those questions.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought we wanted to do the poll.
So, yeah. Team, would you mind throwing that poll up for us to get started? Would love to understand how everyone in the audience here, after the discussion that David and Rahul had, what do you see as the top priority to scale agentic AI? We talked a lot about scalability there. Strengthening integration foundations, improving governance and control, upgrading that architecture, or aligning teams and your operating model. We'll give you 30 seconds.
We need like Jeopardy music or something.
You want to sing, David? All right, and give it a few more seconds.
Any guesses what's going to come out on top? I'm going to guess strengthening integration foundation.
Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and close that poll out and see what we've got. I'm not seeing the results from that yet, but I'll hold and wait for those to show up. In the meantime, I kind of want to roll into a couple of these questions that came in while you guys were speaking. I'm going to throw this one to David first. How should APIs and AI gateways coexist?
My personal preference, I think it makes more sense to get those from the same vendor, and especially the API management market. And the reason why is management of services is not the gateway. Yeah, it provides security, provides some observability, but there's so much more to it than just that. And if you're just buying a standalone AI gateway, you might be missing out on other things. So, for example, having good analytic reports that can go deep into the runtime data that was captured is very valuable. Being able to see traffic by subscriber is very valuable. And those subscribers, you may have, especially if you do B2B scenarios, you may have a business partner who's using both REST and MCP and having a visibility into all of that client's traffic. And then maybe track monetization is not that big in APIs, but for those who have it, it's very important. And then perhaps being able to monetize MCP, and then having a portal where you can discover these assets and onboard to those is also important. We are seeing some interest in B2B MCP. My own employer, actually, we at Forrester, we have an MCP server to deliver our research, right? So having siloed gateways and siloed portals for those kinds of things and siloed analytics just doesn't work. I think all of that needs to be unified. And so whether it's one runtime that has both REST and AI features or two separate runtimes, if it all comes from the same vendor and it's one holistic solution, that makes a lot of sense to me. Or if they are siloed, if you can find a vendor that, like an API management vendor, that can integrate with the particular gateways that you need, if they're from other providers, but can layer on those added functionalities I described, that may also be a good solution.
But I like your idea, David, about what you just mentioned in your speak as well, that you can have two different runtimes, to manage the separation of concern over here. What API gateway provides you with the policy enforcements, and the second is the AI gateway, which is truly to manage the traffic that we're talking about from the AI perspective as well. So you can still have two runtime planes over here, while you can have it being brought by a single vendor or a multi-vendor, depending on.
Yeah, and that's more the user. Even if it's one runtime, the vendor may provide a user experience that feels very specialized for those purposes. My main concern there and of course, every vendor is different. You got to evaluate them, but I would look at what's the performance? Like, if you're loading this other stuff I don't need for this use case, is it going to perform as well? And maybe the answer is yes, but you want to look maybe a little more closely at that than if they're more specialized gateways.
Correct.
So I have our poll results back. This might lead into something that touches on where you were headed there, David. So you were right. Good prediction. 43% responded with strengthening the integration foundation. Mm-hmm. Next up was almost 24% with aligning teams and operating models. So
good pick. Maybe
on that note, what are some of these non-AI factors that really block that production scalability?
So non-AI factors that impact production scalability. Well, still start with some technical ones. I already touched on, like backend, because load is very unpredictable. It can be easier to crush your backend. So that would be one non-AI factor. I mean, that's kind of an old factor, but really all these factors are old. It's just amplified with AI. Another one is, I think, skills and operating model. Mm-hmm. So I won't go too much in this because I think I already said a little bit at the end there, but organizations that plow ahead without thinking about integration for their AI, and then they realize they have an integration challenge and they got to take a step back and bring the integration team involved in there. And so I just want to, again, emphasize that my view is very important to have the integration team and the AI teams aligned. And if you don't have them aligned, then you may be able to roll out some answer engines and some RAG tools and generative AI, things like that. But when you want your AI agents to actually do something, to take action, then you're going to have some issues very quickly if you don't have the integration team well aligned with the AI team.
Right. Yeah. Let's keep rolling here. We had a really good one that got upvoted a couple of times. So you discussed skills and MCP as two distinct concepts.
Yeah.
The person that posted this, I feel like you guys know pretty well. In his opinion, they are architecturally the same thing, a way to package deterministic orchestration that AI agents can search for, find, understand, and use. Or do you see a deeper difference?
Yeah. I know the person who posted, so real quick, I'll just say to him, buongiorno, piacere. So let me take a step back and lay out what I view as the API architecture, integration architecture for AI. Traditionally, we have 2 or 3 layers of APIs, or the technical or system APIs at the bottom, where it's usually shown visually. On top of that, you orchestrate those to present digital business capabilities, digital value streams, sometimes called process APIs. Oftentimes, you may see a 3rd layer, usually called an experience API, or which has a backend for front-end pattern to deliver a specific user experience in a browser, mobile device, maybe a touchscreen kiosk, whatever the channel user audience is. Now, the backend for front-end, or BFF, defines very linear flows for a human. That does not work for AI agents for reasons that should be obvious. So that goes out the window. That experience tier is gone when you're starting to deal with AI agents in terms of your architectural layer. And it's still there, but the humans, we haven't gone away yet as humans. We still need to connect to your businesses through traditional channels and devices. But there's now a parallel stack on top of that business layer, business API layer, to support AI agents. So what does that look like? Well, at the 2 layers there, if you go to the very top, are the AI agents. I'd call that the AI orchestration tier. And then how do you have the AI agents connecting to those business capabilities? For that, you need what I'm calling the context tier, where context is, I would define that as the data and business capabilities the agents need with their semantic meaning, which is kind of unique to the AI agents. That semantic meaning part is unique. All right, so with that picture, that context tier, I would put MCP and agent skills in that tier. So if you think about architecturally layering, then yes, that's correct. They're in the same area. But there's still a difference between them. And it's not a very clear line. There's a lot of overlap. But agent skills, my view is they are much better suited for providing knowledge to an agent on how to get work done. When it's time to get work done, actually do work, MCP is usually going to be better. Now, there's overlap, which is you can have scripts that you install in an agent skill that can also do work, just like MCP tools. That's where they start to have a fuzzy line. But with MCP, you have, I think, easier ability to govern, easier visibility into what's happening through MCP gateways, or AI gateways. We could call AI gateways with MCP capabilities. And then you think about delivering these capabilities across the enterprise. It's going to be easier to deliver an MCP endpoint and a portal that catalogs the MCP endpoint than to tell teams to install this package of agent skills in their application. And especially when you get the B2B. I mentioned earlier that my employer is looking at MCP to deliver our services to our clients. But that would be impossible with agent skills. That's just a non-starter, but MCP makes that possible, and I think that would apply to many organizations. So even though there's overlap, they do exist in the same architectural layer. The problems they solve are subtly different and work together with, just to summarize, agent skills focusing on knowledge of how to get work done being the primary focus, and MCP on providing a governed interface to actually execute that work.
Nice. So then, Rahul, what's your take on collaborative AI agents or multi-agent systems, depending on how we want to use what terminology there, in terms of pros and cons, benefits and drawbacks?
I think the collaborative multi-agent system is going to be something, we'll be talking more about that in the coming days as well. It's going to be, it's a very powerful concept at the moment. And, you will see that, how this is all going to get together at the moment. The benefit, what we see is that you actually see a more decomposition of the complex problems in the multi-agent ecosystems as well. You have the specializations that actually helps you to drive agents which are meant for that, rather than trying for a particular agentic system trying to perform everything together. And also parallelism as well, that brings out together as well. You can have multi-agent working simultaneously in a different architectural patterns that can drive things. So this topic is going to get more and more momentum, as well as what David called out earlier in his narrative as well, about the A to A communication, how it really comes up together and how does it really works out. But the challenges that we need to understand is that there has to be, as what David called out, clear protocols, how this is going to be agreed, the shared context, how this all works. So those things, probably the coordination activities are something that probably is still getting ironed out as well. But the intent is already there, within the industry, that we would be embarking on this particular initiative very soon.
All right. How about we pop into poll number 2, see how folks are feeling about halfway through our Q&A. We can get that posted, please. Great. So after, let's see here. It's a yes or no, or maybe not sure. Is your organization truly ready to scale agentic AI beyond pilots? We'll give this one should be pretty quick to answer. How about 15 seconds or so? David, Rahul, predictions?
I think after our webinar, I think the teams are more confident that they're able to scale to Agentic AI. Looks like.
I'm not going to hazard a guess. I mean, there might be people saying no, but they're more confident what they need to do to become ready.
Correct.
So I can see go either way.
Okay. All right. So results are telling us that 58% of folks feel like they are, yes, truly ready to scale. Right. 23%, not so much. About 17.5%, not sure. Interesting split there.
Well, for those who said no, hopefully you at least have some takeaways here of what you need to now know what you need to do to get to that state of it.
To get there. Yeah, definitely. All right. Let's hop back to our Q&A. Things are still quite busy here. So let's, we were talking about collaborative agents moments ago. So maybe let's stick with that thread for a second. Rahul, does event-driven architecture have a functional role for these collaborative agents? They're event-driven by nature.
I think they have a very key role to play, and again, David called that out as well when we were talking about the event-driven architecture in our in our talking as well. That while I mentioned about the event-driven architecture providing the right signals to really react, act, and make the decisions as well, but you will have event-driven architecture playing a vital role in this complex multi-agent ecosystem as well. How agent actually can send the signal to make certain decisions, act on it, and make that right decision. So number one, getting the real-time data is very important as well, and triggering that is also second important part as well. So in both the aspect, I think the EDA plays a very vital role.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate that because I do see two other questions in the chat that you just actually indirectly answered. How does EDA enable adaptive decision-making, and how does improve responsiveness and context awareness? What Rahul just said. When an event occurs, an agent can react immediately in the moment and not have to wait for a batch cycle to run. So that's how it enables adaptive decision-making. And then for context awareness, there's a pattern called event-carried state transfer, where you push event state out right from the system of record to other places. So you can use that pattern to push changes as they're occurring into, let's say, a vector database or somewhere that's accessible to the agent. That way, when the agent starts to run and is making decisions, it's making decisions with the latest state of the organization, not data from yesterday's batch cycle. So triggering events and giving events real-time data of what the state is at this moment.
Okay. Do we have time for one more?
I can do one more. I can squeeze one more.
Okay. This is one I'm personally curious about. So thanks for whoever posted it. How do AI gateways manage token economics?
Yeah, I'll take that. And there was a similar question on features unique to AI gateways. So AI gateways or API gateways with AI policies, either one, they have policies that are knowledgeable of tokens. They can see tokens in the headers. There's different kinds of tokens. They can capture those and log those. So, and they can also associate them with the client ID of whatever a credential made the request. And some of the better products out there, you can also say, here's a dollar amount I'm paying per token for this particular LLM. And you can actually see dollar amount reports, like this amount of money for this agent for this client using the agent. So you can see where your money is going to. That's the main way they tackle tokenomics. But I just want to expand it because there was the other one on features unique to AI gateways. I've also seen, I'm looking at my list here, things like hooks that can connect into content filtering things to look for malicious content, toxicity, things like that, dangerous content injection, semantic caching. So two prompts mean the same thing semantically, even if they're not string literal matches. You can echo the prior response, not even hit the LLM, which also helps with token economics and reducing the amount of spend you have. I've also seen things around prompt enrichment to enforce certain things in the prompt to give you more standardization. It's not token economics, but still. I've also seen things around compression, trying to find things in the prompt that aren't adding value, but are burning tokens and take them out before the LLM sees them. So that's also token related. Model routing, model failover. If this model is failing, fail over to it may be a less desirable model, but a less desirable model is better than an outage. Maybe also routing based on the request content, figure out if we need a more expensive or cheaper model, doing round robin between models so you can log the results and see which one's performing better. And then there's also similar things on MCP. I've seen some things where they're attempting to do progressive disclosure with MCP to reduce token burn, and also that prompt optimization. I've seen some of that in MCP in addition to things I mentioned earlier with authorization policies.
I'm really grateful to you both and to our audience for such really fantastic engagement. We didn't get to all the questions, but those that we didn't get to, I've made note, we'll document them and we'll try to get those back out to the folks that posted them. Thank you, David. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Forrester. Thank you, Capgemini. Great work today, everybody.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.